On this episode of the Girl Talk podcast,
I think we've needed to do this for a while, but I don't think we've been ready to. Mm-hmm. And that is debrief from what we experienced through Helene.
Just brought up, I'm getting emotional too. It brought up the scariest moments of life, the uncertain moments.
Yeah. Hello there. You're listening to the Girl Talk podcast. My name is Carol.
I'm Kelly.
I'm Tricia.
And today we are going to do somewhat of a different podcast because I think we've needed to do this for a while, but I don't think we've been ready to. Mm-hmm. And that is debrief from what we experienced through Helene. Now, I know not everybody listening to this podcast was impacted by Helene. We were all impacted in different ways because Helene came right to our doorstep.
Literally.
And I think I've just noticed that just recently I've finally been able to talk about it. And here we are, months and months later. Yeah. And I just now have gotten to the point where I can talk about it. And I don't know if that's just because we were just living through it or if that is because I'm just now ready. I don't know what the breaking point is, but a couple of weeks ago I started kind of processing through that with my co-host Jeff, and we were talking about the events that kind of unfolded right here in our own area. And one of the things that I think is important to do is to talk about it because not everybody who is listening experienced it, but our experiences were very real. Right. And I'll just start the discussion by saying in my years and years, I'm almost 24 some years in here. And in my 24 years, I have never volunteered to stay overnight because of a rain event. Mm. And I don't know why, but something just felt different about that. And so they came to us on that Thursday night and said, we have some concerns about
Wednesday night.
Was it Wednesday night?
It was Wednesday night, yeah.
Wednesday night, they came to us and said, we have some concerns about the storm getting bad. We can't ask you to stay, but if you'd be willing, and several of us volunteered. So I went across the street to the Holiday Inn, got a room, and just was expecting on Thursday morning to come in and kind of business as usual. We had just started Impact Days, which is our station time during the year to tell you all the stories about how God's at work, not knowing that we were stepping right into the middle of a God-sized story. And so we came back in, and everything was kind of different. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just different that morning. And as we looked out the window and as it continued to rain, we realized this is something that is going to be a huge event for our area. Then we began to lose, the ability to communicate through cell phones. We lost the ability to, landline phones were out everywhere. We lost internet. I mean, all the things started happening. And so all that we knew was what we could see out our window and the information that we could get from our sources. And we had staff all over the place. I don't remember now, but I'm guessing there was, 6 or 8 of us here?
7. Yes.
7.
So, yeah. 6 or 8. Look at that. Yeah.
There were 7 of
there
us
were 9
here.
altogether with a spouse and a daughter.
Yeah. So
For how long? What are you talking about?
We were here for 7-8 days.
Something like that.
Yeah. It started
7 or 8 nights.
Yeah, it started because we were over at the Holiday Inn across the way.
Right.
They evacuated us from there. The intersection, this is what I was sharing with someone who is one of our radio friends, but is from the Atlanta area. She was just asking me, what our experience was. They evacuated us from the Holiday Inn because the intersection right here down below the radio station became what would you call that?
River.
Well, it wasn't even a river. I mean, it was so far out of its banks, it submerged several buildings right here at the bottom of the. If you're familiar with where the radio station is, the Zaxby's that sits near there, and the VA
hotel.
the VA headquarters. Not VA headquarters, but the VA quarters, and a gas station down there, and that just became. For me, it was like watching a movie. Where you see some kind of natural disaster, just seeing it happen because it just didn't seem real.
Right.
And we were here, and we kind of off and on were on the air. Somebody was on the air live all that time, but we would take turns and we would go out, and we kind of staged your office as the girls' sleeping quarters, and the guys were upstairs. And so we would go to your office and sleep for a couple hours, get back up, come get back on the air. And just that was the pace of life. We made friends with the folks at the Holiday Inn. They were supplying us in food, which we were kind of on an island because I-40 was closed because of a mudslide to get down the mountain to Marion, where I live, and then the other way, the Tennessee.
Everything
I-40 was blocked.
And I-26 too. Yeah.
So we really became kind of an island in and of ourselves, which was the case for a lot of people. And we began to kind of process through where it wasn't even like we were even making plans for anything. I don't know about you. You didn't see your family for some time.
That's right. Yeah.
How long was it before your family showed up?
I guess it was probably 2 days. It was Sunday morning before I was able to see them or hear from them or contact them at all. And it just because they showed up here at the radio station, because of course there was no cell service, no power, no internet. No way to communicate other than we had the radio, that we could communicate with all of our listeners, which was such a blessing. Yeah. But we couldn't communicate with our family.
Right. I was blessed enough to have my daughter here with me, so that wasn't a concern. Tricia you made it home to your family, but you had a much different experience because you were experiencing this in real time with your boys and with your husband and in your neighborhood. Kind of tell us what happened with you guys.
Well, I went home. Was it Thursday? I'm getting confused of the days myself, but I remember deciding to go home.
Right.
And so went home, and I remember all of the warnings that they were saying, this is going to be bad, but we've heard that before.
Yeah.
And so there was a part of me that wasn't quite taking it all in. I do remember making the choice to fill up my car with gas and thanking God that I did that so many times because I filled it up that day, Thursday or whatever it was. Yeah. And so I didn't worry about gas literally the whole time. But I drove home and I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be like. We went to sleep on Thursday and it was raining, but it just wasn't that big of a deal in those moments. And I remember thinking, well, this is going to pass us by like a lot of times things do. Well, overnight, Thursday into Friday, it got worse and worse and worse. And then just the winds and the cracking of the trees and the snapping of power lines, which you could hear.
Yeah. Right.
And then the power went out, and then you're in the shell of a house. And just the vulnerability of that experience, because we had no power, we had no internet, we had no ability to communicate, and we're in the house, which was great that we had a house, but it felt like a shell.
Yeah.
And like you said, we were marooned in our neighborhood because thousands of trees were down in our neighborhood. Thousands. You could not leave our neighborhood. Couldn't get in, couldn't get out. And we were all just sort of stuck.
How many houses is that kind of in there?
Oh, wow. It's there's several neighborhoods all around there, but our particular neighborhood was closed off to there was about 200 houses there that no, that's probably too many. I would say 100 houses that were inaccessible because giant trees were down. Yeah. And that was the case for several days. The first time I made it here to the station was Sunday. So that was Friday, absolute closed off from everything, people swarming the neighborhood on Friday and Saturday, cutting trees and moving limbs and helping one another. And then finally on Sunday, they finally did clear a road in and out of our neighborhood. And right by our house was the only road accessible for several neighborhoods. So they created one pathway. And so a lot of cars were going that were trying to get through. And I finally made it here on Sunday, but the vulnerability of it was really scary. The inaccessibility of it. What if you needed to go to the hospital? What if people didn't have gas? They didn't have food. All of those things started to kind of dawn on us. The water, all of that, and unknown of when is it going to be restored.
Yeah, and I think the other scary thing was we have become so attuned to watching things on social media and seeing kind of the landscape, and everybody looking out their window thought theirs was the worst area when that was the case for a lot of different people. Like it wasn't just the worst in your neighborhood or my neighborhood. It was the worst in a lot of neighborhoods, and a lot a lot of people lost their lives, and it was overwhelming.
Right.
I remember us getting, because we were able to get internet back probably earlier than most, and beginning to see the pictures that people were posting. And I, like you, have heard the, flash flood warnings and all of that for years and never really thought any. I know the places that usually the water gets up near the road, and I just avoid those areas. And there are several in my town in particular, and I just know that because I've lived there my whole life. And you know to stay away from those areas. But this was unlike anything I've ever known. And I still remember, like, when you walked in on Sunday, I'm even getting a little emotional. And I can remember talking to several other staff members, seeing you for the first time, because we just didn't know. Right. We just did not know. Right. And you realize how close this family is whenever you don't know how they are and how their houses are and those kinds of things. And it was, I can remember one evening Kelly took me for a walk because obviously I needed it. I mean, it was just the pressure of it, and we were getting information because people who could communicate were reaching out to us at the radio station, so we were transmitting that information constantly. But there just came a point where I just kind of, I had my moment.
It was a lot to manage.
Yeah. And it was re-traumatizing. I know for me, and I think for so many people, it just brought up, I'm getting emotional too, it brought up the scariest moments of life, the uncertain moments. And it wasn't just that, it was everything in life and the fears. That's how trauma works. It's not one thing, it's all the things at the same time. And it was just, it's still right now to this day. It is hard to process.
Yeah. I had an event at our church back in February, and a lady walked up to me that I'd never met before, and she said, hi. She said hello, and I said, what's your name? And she told me, and we just started to talk for just a minute, and she got visibly emotional. This is in February. All this happened in September.
So recent. Goodness.
Yeah. She came up to me, and she said, you will never know what the radio station meant to me during those days. And I haven't been here so long, you realize God is using things that we don't even really get an opportunity to see, but that God is using it. And you know that kind of on a global level, because God uses all sorts of things, not because there's anything special about us, but we were just transmitting that information and playing songs to continue to keep people encouraged. And she just couldn't even finish. She just got so emotional in that moment. And what you need to know is that we would to give you the information that you needed, and then we would play a song and bawl through the songs. Right. There were several times. I still can't listen to Goodness of God without completely just getting, because I can remember distinctly you being in here and we started playing that song, and there was something about that song and hearing CeCe Winans sing it that it just brought everything home. So we'd cry a while, and then Kelly took me for a walk one day, because I mean, and people are still living in the middle of this. I don't want you to think that everybody's over it and now that everything's back to normal, everybody's good.
Yeah.
On the daily, we're still hearing from people who, in fact, just this week, our friend Angel, who listens to the morning show and communicates with us quite often, they had to completely tear down their house. Now, Samaritan's Purse is coming in to build them a new house, but just the emotional weight of all childhood memories. It's their family home. Yeah. Angel was sharing with us just how heartbreaking it's been. Although it's good, still it's those
got a good
memories.
Resolution.
Yeah. And the lives that were lost, the people that we lost, the just the total devastation that we saw. It's just,
and the changes forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that's important to remember, too, is that there was so much fear during that time. And that's the power of God to get rid of that as people listen to this radio ministry. You know, we talk often about how that there are days when even us who listen to this radio station all the time, who are, you know, you ladies especially are behind the mics all the time, that it's easy for it not to penetrate because it's every day. But when there are these moments where life is traumatic and there is major fear and there's major uncertainty, that even us rely on this radio station to get us through every single moment, just like our listeners. And I'll never forget one of our staff members who reached out during that time. Our friend Brian, who was really, really in a bad situation with his family and scared and way out in the area where there was not a whole lot of way to communicate with people, and
or for emergency personnel to get to him either.
Correct, yeah. And so, but he listened to and relied on this station in ways that he's never had to do before, and that this became a lifeline for him to just walk him through every single moment. And I'll never forget him calling in tears, telling us that without this radio ministry, that he would have been in a different place without hope.
Yeah. Well, you're pointing up a couple of things that are really ringing true, which is when you choose in some way, and it's not easy, to worship in the middle of hard times, God pours out special grace. I'm sure of it. I know it. And I think we saw it there, and what we're talking about, like when you played Goodness of God and when Brian heard those things and when you listened in the middle of the fears and you chose to worship, that's when God just pours out special grace, and you can just sense his presence. He inhabits the presence and the praises of his people, and so he is there when you choose to worship, even in those horrible, hard, uncertain, scary times. And then also, there's great power in helping.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that was what was so beautiful to be a part of. I couldn't wait to come in here and see you all. And I do remember that on Sunday. I was just, I couldn't believe how much I needed to see you all and be here. And then to get on the mic was completely different. Because I couldn't wait to help. Let me help. Let me help. My life's not completely fixed. Things are going crazy, but let me help. Let me help.
Yeah.
There's power in helping. Yeah. And we got to do that. And I feel like God blessed us in a rich way to be able to help.
Yeah.
Even when things weren't completely set up in our own lives.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the great things about the timing of it. You know, we were in the middle of Impact Days, as you mentioned. We had just finished up one full day of Impact Days. And that's what we do every 6 months. In fact, we're doing that this week. And that's the time where we just stop our regular programming. All of our staff come in from all over the listening area. So all of our remote staff come in, and we spend 2.5 days just sharing God's stories. Well, it takes a lot of work to put all that together, and a lot of setup, and a lot of making sure folks have hotel rooms, and all of that had been taken care of. And so here we are ready. Our staff is here. Staff are poised, ready to help, ready to share stories. And we got to do that for a day and a half before we sent everybody home. But because of all of that work that had already happened, we were already ready to be able to help in a new and a different way.
Yeah.
We didn't have to stop our regular programming in order to help with Helene.
Yeah.
We were able to just keep going and use those hotel rooms for the, at least the one night that we were able to stay in the hotel, for our staff that needed to stay for on-air work during Helene. And it's such a blessing that God prepared all of that ahead of time so that we could be helpers and we could share information with our listeners. It's such a privilege to have gotten the opportunity to do that.
God kind of gave me a visual on that this past week. My friend Danielle, who lives in my neighborhood, posted a picture, And what you need to know is that one house in my neighborhood was destroyed by a tree during Helene, and they had to tear the house down. It was a historic home, beautiful home. And every day since September, I've been driving by the rubble of that house. I mean, you're talking the walls, their mattress, it's all rubble right now. And every day I've been driving past it. I was even telling somebody it's so hard to just drive past that every day, but people are dealing with it all around, this area and up in the mountains as well. You drive by places that don't look the same as they did before the end of September. Mm-hmm. And she posted a picture of spring flowers springing up out of the middle of that rubble.
Oh, wow.
I had driven by it, honestly, y'all, every day. And I hadn't noticed the flowers.
Oh, wow.
And God just kind of stopped me there and said, this is why what you guys do every day matters, because you're helping people stop and see the flowers. Even in the midst of devastation and heartache and hopelessness and brokenness, you're helping them see the flowers. There's a blessing there.
Yeah, there's always goodness in God.
Yeah.
Like that song that got us through that time.
Right.
God brings so much goodness and beauty from ashes. Mm-hmm. And to get to be reminded of that is huge.
Yeah.
So, and our privilege and our responsibility as believers, to help other people see that hope and see the joy in life.
And we can drive by that situation or live in that situation for months and years on end, and we can miss the flowers.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we've been specifically called for such a time as this to help people see the flower. There have been so many stories from Helene.
Oh, yeah.
That if you listen to Impact Days, you'll hear some of those stories that we've been blessed to hear and be a part of. And I just think that God was reminding us, hey, what you are doing matters, and kind of giving us a shot in the arm for whatever comes next.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories and one of my favorite moments is when we got the phone call from Dale and Susan Taylor, who had been listening. So their very short version. They are Impact Days supporters. They've always been supporters of this ministry. They were listening during Impact Days. The hurricane came through and did a number on their neighborhood. They, of course, didn't have any power. Her father lives just down the street, and he didn't have any power either. But they were able to find some hand-cranked radios, some battery-operated radios. They were able to turn on the Light FM. That's how they got through that time. Her dad, especially, when she went and gave him a radio, he said, basically, this is a lifesaver for me, and I didn't know how bad I had it and how much I was alone and how much hope I needed. And this couple were profoundly impacted by the Light FM during that time. And so they then came around and gave a challenge gift in order to encourage other people to give to support the ministry right after Impact Days, since we didn't have Impact Days. And then they sent us this note. They wrote us when they sent in after we met the challenge. We had lots and lots and lots of folks. I think it was like 250 folks gave to support their challenge that they issued through their business. And when they sent in their check, they sent in a thank you note to us. And they said, to all of our friends at the Light FM, your radio ministry has been such a blessing to us over the years, and especially during Hurricane Helene. We pray that your ministry continues to bless, encourage, and draw people to Jesus for years to come. And then they put in the scripture, Philippians 4:19, which says, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And what a blessing this family was to us, because God used us to be a blessing to them during the hardest moments of their life.
Such good stuff.
And we love this.
Yeah.
We love it when people send us handwritten thank you notes.
Yeah, because those are kind of going by the wayside.
They are. Well, and I've got like 4 of them here, right? And I put them up on my whiteboard. I probably should share them with everybody else, but I'm a little selfish when it comes to this.
You can turn a new leaf over right now.
Can I do that? Here's the one. I love this one because this particular woman, her hand is shaky. And so she, probably like my mom, has an essential trimmer. She's probably older, so it's really hard to read it. But it says, she sent us this note in January. She said, during the power outage in late September and October in our state, I listened to the Light FM on my battery-powered weather radio with my cat and my dog. Mm-hmm. So that's not the only people she had. She said, or only company she had. You folks kept me uplifted, for it was a sad time. I'm truly thankful for the uplifting message and all the ways every day that you share the love of Christ. Lots of love, Miss Anderson. Oh, and just what a blessing! What a blessing. Okay, so the next one. This one was from one of our donors who sent in a gift after Impact Days as well, so in November. And she writes, thank you all for being on the air after Hurricane Helene. You were a light in the darkness. And then she encouraged us with John 1:5 that says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I just think about the time during Helene when it was so dark, and yet here was the light shining bright. Not only the Light FM, because God kept us on the air, but just the light of Christ, because that's why we do what we do here at this radio ministry, is that we're here to shine the light of Christ. Yeah. But God blessed us by keeping this radio on air for everything but 9 minutes. Yeah. You know, what a blessing that is. There were trees that fell in all kinds of ways that should have hit buildings, that should have taken down transmitters, generators that should have failed, but yet God said, I'm going to protect this radio ministry because they're going to be the ones providing my hope and encouragement to the entire area that was affected by Helene with one radio signal. Yeah, absolutely. God is so good. Yeah. And faithful.
And I think we probably need to tell the story that we needed fuel. Yeah. Up at the
STL building.
The STL building.
Yeah. Which is a little tiny building that takes the signal from the studio up to the mountain.
Mount Mitchell. Yeah. Yeah. So we were running out of fuel. And
quickly,
the guys left us here on the air and kind of set out and hiked up the trail. It's a road, but hiked up what was a trail then, and there were so many trees down that there was
48.
48
trees?
Okay.
Yes.
To be exact.
So, yeah, we were like, okay, we're just about out of gas. There's no way a fuel truck can get up there because fuel trucks are rather large. And
there's 48 trees in the way.
There was 48 trees in the way, and we somehow, I don't think we were supposed to do this, but we did it anyway. We put a call out for Chase Harris and his buddies because we knew they had equipment.
Yeah.
And somebody got that message to Chase, and they showed up here with equipment, and they flat cleared that road in what should have taken days, if not weeks.
Yep. And Seth. Yep. Seth and Bruce, 3 guys, 4 guys, 5 guys. Maybe.
They brought their heavy equipment. They cleared that road in half a day.
Oh, yeah. 4 hours.
Yeah. 4 hours.
4 hours.
And they basically told us that the fuel truck had tried to get up here and couldn't. And so they sent it somewhere else, and they couldn't reschedule us for days. And we were like, oh, what do we do? The fuel guy shows up, fills up the tank in the middle of the night, and somebody paid for it. Do we know who paid for it?
They did it for free.
Yeah, okay, the company did it for free. Filled the tank for free, and just days later came and filled it again.
Yes. Yeah.
So it wasn't
but
only...
God.
Yeah.
But God. And I think when they got up there and actually tested it, we had like 12 hours or something like that of fuel left that we would have been off the air.
Right.
If God had not worked out for the guys to come and clear the road and for the propane tank to come and fill up the propane, we would not have been able to have been sharing the love of Christ, the light, the hope of Jesus to the 7 million people that are under the sound of the signal.
Crazy way God worked.
Yeah.
So any other stories that you guys can think of or ways that you saw people loving people? You tell a powerful story about the meal in your neighborhood. I thought that was really
neighbors
cool.
loving on neighbors. That was so powerful. And things are still not the same in our neighborhood. Hey, how you doing? Hugs and things that never took place before Helene. There's such a bond there for sure. But I loved several things I loved about that time. which was a hard time, but there's still things to love, is how people that were not affected as much cared so much about those of us that were.
Yes.
People in South Carolina and other places in Tennessee and other places in North Carolina and Georgia, they cared so much about us. They're constantly calling, praying, sending supplies, supply for supply.
Yeah.
And there was one really cool story I wanted to share because I thought it was so powerful. There was a family who had a generator, and they didn't know what to do with it. They heard on the light that there was a couple of supply places, and so they drove to this place, and they said, "Here's a little generator. I know you're not asking for this. I don't know if you need it, but here's this generator." And so the people were like, really not looking for those right now, but they took it. And a few minutes later, an elderly couple drove up. Her oxygen machine was about to die, and they needed that generator to get her through the night. And it was those immediate stories that we were hearing on the air.
Yeah.
It was so amazing to hear on air what people were doing for one another. So we were able to spread the light, but you were carrying the light.
Yeah,
the light
absolutely.
was being passed around like a candle being lit.
Yeah.
So many places.
And even we just recently did a play and pray in Old Fort, North Carolina. They were impacted greatly. Still, you can see the effects of the storm there in that community. And the first lady who stopped by that morning came up, and I was talking to her, and the place where she worked was pretty much underwater. And she said, "But have you heard about the people of West Virginia?" And she began to tell me about a storm that had hit West Virginia. And she said, "My church is gathering supplies for the church in West Virginia." Now, there's still stuff to be done in Old Fort, but here she's coming to tell me about, will you tell people to take supplies to this church so they can go to West Virginia and help those folks? That was the overwhelming story of that day in Old Fort. They were telling us about other people who needed help, and they wanted to make sure, and wildfires and people going out. Just all the ways, all the things that I love about the small communities that make up our towns. It was on display. And the church, my goodness gracious, I was so proud of the church and I'm talking about the Big C Church, because a lot of places opened their facilities and housed people who'd been displaced. A lot of facilities shut all their operations down and became feeding centers and supply houses. I mean, I remember seeing one church and their whole auditorium was full of diapers and wipes and canned foods and things that people could, paper towels, toilet paper, all things people could use. They were stacked on the pews all the way through the church. And it was a time where the church actually was being the church.
Right. Yeah.
And how we were designed to love each other, to say, let me look at what I have and see how I can meet that need for you.
Oh, and let us never forget that.
Right.
And
let us always do that.
Let's get back to it. Don't believe the lie that there's only bad going on right now.
Yeah.
There's a rhetoric of that there's so much division and stuff. People are still loving on one another, and we can do that. We can continue that love.
And should. It's not just about how do we get people into our churches, how do we get people onto our pews, but how can we also go out there and serve people and be the hands and feet of Jesus. Whether it's here or whether we go to West Virginia or to Kentucky or to California where they had the wildfires or whatever it is that we need to do.
Or your neighbor.
Yeah, or your
across
next door
the
neighbor.
street or around the world. Yeah, I love the song from Natalie Lane that says, "People helping people, making space at the table." That's exactly what we saw the church do. They found a place for everybody. And you know what? My pastor said this recently. He said, whenever Hurricane Helene hit, nobody asked anybody what party they were a part of. When they drove into the church parking lot, it was like, "We have food. Do you need food? Here's food. We have diapers. Do you need diapers? Here's diapers." All the things. And nobody was concerned about what side of the aisle they fell upon. It was just based on, hey, my neighbor's in need and I can help. Yeah. And I love that about our churches and about the organizations that showed up during the days after Helene.
Yeah.
What's the big lesson that you learned from Helene? If you had to just take a couple of takeaways about things that you personally learned. I'll go first and give y'all a little bit to talk about that or to think about it. I was here because I couldn't get home. The interstate was closed. And so I was here for a week, 8 days, something like that. And when we finally got internet service here, I remember seeing an aerial photograph from a intersection near my home that was completely underwater. And
I remember that moment when you
my
saw that.
17-year-old walked into this room, and I was sitting right in this place, and that was the first picture she saw, and she just held up her phone, and it was there. And I left the room, and she said, "Mama, what if our house is gone?" And I said, "Well, if our house is gone, God gave us that house, so he'll give us another one." Because this was I'm going to say within a half a mile to a mile from my house. And I said, "What is it that matters?" And she said, "That's our people. We just got to find out if our people are okay." And so in that moment, we had a chance to process through that, because with her being here with me at work, I couldn't protect her from those things, you know. And so she saw a lot of things that we've since had the opportunity to talk through. But one of the biggest things that I learned about that is that she needs a strong mama, but she also needs to see a mama who's real and honest about how she feels, and grieving the losses of something as devastating as that, and not knowing about our people and feeling unsettled about that. But in the end, it was about our people, you know, our friends, our family members who we just wanted to know were okay. And so that was a big lesson for me, that, yeah, she needs me to be strong, but there are times when she needs to see me weak too. And so that was a big lesson for us.
For me, I think the biggest lesson, it's easy in the midst of trauma like that to say, "Where's God? Why is God not solving this? Why did God let this happen?
Right,
Why, God could have stopped this. Why did he not? What's going on? And where's God?" And so for me, the biggest lesson was to look for God in the little things. All of the little blessings. Look for God in the helpers. That what an opportunity. God doesn't necessarily cause things like this to happen. God doesn't want this broken world to be broken like it is. He doesn't want to have floods and wildfires and natural disasters. But when those things do happen, he is right there by our sides. And he is mobilizing his people. He is mobilizing the Big C Church to go and be his hands and feet. And all we have to do is open our eyes and look. And it doesn't take but just opening our eyes to see God at work in the middle of these kinds of things. And that we don't have to feel abandoned. We can be reminded that God will walk us through whatever the tragedy is in our lives, and we don't have to wonder if he's abandoned us, because he's never going to do that. So that was the reminder, just to see all of the little ways that God showed up.
For sure.
And so the reminder to me was the importance of having my heart and mind and eyes open in the middle of trauma to see even the little things.
Y'all are reminding me of this time. I guess I still haven't processed through all the feelings of it. Just thinking back on sitting in that dark house with my family and not knowing. And it's all true what you're saying. Possessions come and go. Your people, that's what matters. God is there in the midst of the worst times. And we just have to look for him, and we'll see him. And he is. He holds us through all that. But it was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. So those are both lessons that I'm really holding on to. One personally is that we're all more alike than we are different. And I looked at my neighbors differently before, and I'm sorry to say that. But I didn't think I had much in common with this person or that person, and that I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about them or who they are. But God really opened up my eyes that they are just like me, just like my kids, just like my husband, just like our family. And the walls came down to be able to love in a different way and not judge and not set someone aside, but to turn toward them in love. So I think that was a lesson from that. But it's really amazing. Just thinking about nights. Every night we sat around the table when the lights went down. Oh, I hated when the lights went down, when the sun went down, you know. Because it seemed like everything was okay when the sun was out. And then the sun went down. And we'd light the candles, and I could feel my anxiety rise. But we'd sit around, and we would have dinner, whatever dinner was.
Yeah.
And then we would play. We played, like, games. We played card games. And that was just a lovely moment. To find those little moments of joy with your people or
right
in the midst of that. And I can't think about Helene without thinking about those moments.
Yeah.
So,
No, one of my favorite moments actually was when we had a coworker show up with his wife and his two children, and we sat right there in that corner in the studio, and we played. His two children and me played Uno with these little tiny like miniature Uno cards, like
travel cards.
They were travel cards that I keep at my desk at work just in case anybody wants to play. I don't know, Uno in the middle of the day, or in case you get stuck here during the middle of a hurricane. And we sat on the floor and played, and it was so normal.
Yeah.
You know, it was such a normal moment, of joy and laughter and being able to help, kids not feel scared and have some sort of normal was one of my favorite memories of that time.
Yeah. I go back to the daffodils sprouting in the middle of the destruction. That's why we're here every day, to kind of help you process through things, to pray with you. That's what this ministry is all about. It's what Play and Pray is about. It's what Impact Days is all about. It's what we do every day. And we care about you. So if there's a way we can serve you, a way we can pray for you, you're always welcome to get in touch. You can do that by emailing us at girltalk@thelightfm.org. You can check in on the Facebook page. Let us know what you think. And make sure you share this with a friend who maybe needs a little bit of help processing through Helene, because it's been good for me. So thank you guys. Appreciate that so much. And we're going to save you a seat next time we gather around these microphones for the next Girl Talk podcast.